Welcome to T2T Network, and this is New York Giants Corner, baby. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of New York Giants Corner, the aftermath of the loss to the New York Jets. It was, not a great game, not a pretty game, and here we are sitting in the 2023 season at 2-6, and it is essentially a lost season. I apologize if my glasses look crooked, if I look silly. I stepped in my glasses like 2 weeks ago. I need to get them fixed. I've been lazy about that, so if they're crooked, I apologize. But 2023 season hasn't been going obviously like we wish. It's amazing to think that with all the crap this team has gone through, as bad as they played for the most part, defense has been playing really, it's been playing lights out for the past 3 or 4 weeks. But obviously the offense has been a mess the entire season. Given all that, we realistically could be 4-4 at this point instead of 2-6, where we should have won this game against the Jets. I'm not saying we got cheated or anything. Refs blow calls all the time against both teams, in all different types of games. But we should have won that Jets game. The Buffalo game, we should have won that game too, and that would have put us at 4-4. And I'm not even sure. I want to win games. I don't believe in tanking. I do think there are times where, even though I want the team to win, where I think it's better that they lose like this year, for the most part, that they kind of lose out, maybe play well, see players who we need to see play well, see them actually play well, but still lose like close games or something like that, and get, as high draft pick as the highest draft picks we can get in each round in 2024. But I would never, when it's game day, I'm never going to be rooting for the team to lose. I always want the team to win. And you can never count on, no matter how high you draft and no matter how many draft picks you have, you can never count on those players, panning out the way that you think they should. Evan Neal so far is, looking like that type of player. Isaiah Simmons, who we just traded for, who I think went 8th or 9th overall a few years ago to Arizona, is a perfect example. There are plenty of busts in the first round every single year, so no one is, there's no recipe for success just by tanking and getting these high draft picks. Don't get me wrong. The higher the draft pick, the better, because there's a lot you can do. You can take a quarterback. You can, take another good star defensive player, a tackle, whatever, wide receiver, you name it. You've got options. You have other options to trade back as well. So I'm not saying, the point is that you got to make those picks work. There's just, no guarantee that you're going to succeed just because you're drafted 1, 2, 3, 4 in the first round. But amazing to think that this team, with all the crap it's gone through, with such a horrendous season that it's been so far, that we realistically should have been 4-4 at this point. And I don't know how I would have felt about that anyway. We still would have been, even if we had eked out the win against Buffalo, like we should have, even if we had held on for the victory against the Jets, like we should have, how would we have felt about the team? I mean, I still want to win games, but I'd still be, not feeling great about the offense, obviously, because, they still, even with Tyrod, he was looking like a more, well-rounded professional quarterbacks, looking downfield and everything, but it's not like the team was putting up a lot of points, and that's with healthy receivers, a healthy Waller up until the Jets game, Saquon back, and maybe not Saquon 100%. It looks like he's definitely a lot healthier, the second week that he's been back, but man, it's like we could easily be with that really tough start to the schedule, with as bad as the season's been, at least on the offensive side of the ball, we could have been and should have been 4-4. And here we are 2-6. Sorry, just selling off, one of our big time assets, Leonard Williams, which wasn't a surprise. I'm going to get to that later in the show. But amazing to think that with all the garbage we've seen this season so far, and as tough as a start to the schedule that we had the first half of the year, we could have been and should have been 4-4. But here we are 2-6. Anyway, the pretty much the three topics I want to cover this episode: the Giants' loss that we just saw against the Jets, Daniel Jones is back, and the Leonard Williams trade. Okay, so Giants loss. The Giants lost to the Jets. Listen, I don't think Dable, people are, since the season's been so ugly, it's been so bad, especially on the offensive side of the ball. People are looking to criticize every single decision that, contributes, I guess, to a loss, or if we lose, we're looking at every single decision that at this point that the coach or the team made or did, that if it didn't necessarily, lead us to a loss, it didn't help us win. And the big thing was, a lot of people, Giants fans, beat writers, a lot of people criticizing Dable's decision to go for the field goal with like a minute and a half left in the game. It was a 35-yard field goal attempt. And I thought Dable made the right decision. He was 4th and 1. He could have won for it. If he didn't get it, you know what? Either way, I don't think it was a bad decision. Either way, I don't think there was a wrong decision in this situation. It was 4th and 1 with about a minute and 26 seconds left, a minute and a half left, something like that. He decided to go for the 35-yard field goal attempt, which I thought was the right decision, even though Graham Gano has not been playing well. I don't know what his problem is. Apparently he is injured, but he's injured enough to play, and he's injured enough to still boom kicks, back into the end zone on kickoffs, where, the opposing team is generally taking a touchback. So that hasn't been a problem. He's missed quite a few field goals this year. Very unlike Graham Gano, very unlike the guy that re-signed to like a 3-year extension this past offseason. So that's not like him at all. Something's definitely off with him. But you know what? If the guy's out there, he's Graham Gano. He's been around for a long time. You got to trust that he's going to make the kick. And I understand if you don't want to. I understand that. I do. And if he'd gone for it on 4th and 1, gone for the first down and basically iced the game, I would have understood that too. And even if they didn't get it, I think the Jets would have had the ball at like the 17-yard line, but they still would have had it with like almost a minute and a half left. And again, the field goal position, even though the Giants defense, played balls out the entire game, it's still, and it's Zach Wilson, who has been better against previous versions of Zach Wilson, still not playing like Patrick Mahomes or anything like that. And he's not playing great. He's playing just more like more mistake-free football, I'd say, Zach Wilson. It was going to be, it would have been hard for them to do that, to get into field goal position, which they wound up doing anyway. So either decision, I think, was fine. And if the Giants had gone for it on 4th and 1, didn't get it, and the Jets, starting at like their own 17-yard line, still got into field goal position, and kicked that field goal to tie up the game with a second left, everyone would have been criticizing the decision to not go for the field goal. So no matter what Brian Dable did, if it didn't work out, which it didn't, he was going to get criticized no matter what, in my opinion. If I were him, I would have went for the field goal as well. It was a 35-yarder. It was basically an extra point. I got to assume, even though Graham Gano has not been good this year, I got to assume he's going to make that kick, even though I think he had missed a kick earlier in the game. I got to assume that he's going to make that one, and I'm going for it. And then I'm putting the Jets in the position, like Dable said, putting them in the position to have to get a touchdown. And The Giants defense was playing so well that game that even though they did give up the game tying field goal, with a second left in regulation, I would have no reason to believe that they would give up a touchdown to the Jets within a minute and a half to Zach Wilson. I know they gave up one. It was a little freaky. Breece Hall, great play by Breece Hall. What was it, like a 50-yard touchdown by Breece Hall? Short pass to Breece Hall, and he took like 50 yards for a touchdown. Great play by him. But, it was going to take a play like that really in order for the Jets to get a touchdown. So I don't think Dable made the wrong decision. But we've certainly been at this point in the season for quite a while now. It's been so ugly that no matter what decision is made, if it doesn't work out, even if it does make sense, he's gonna get criticized, and the team's gonna get criticized. So they shouldn't have lost that game. That was the worst loss of the season. They should not have lost that game. Really, that stunk. That stunk. And so, I'm just going through my notes over here that I took down before I started recording. The D was playing great. Hats off to Kayvon Thibodeau, 3 sacks. He's like either I think 2 or 3 in the league right now in sacks. He's been playing great for the past few weeks. Ever since he started dropping back into coverage as often as he was the first few weeks, he's been getting to the quarterback a lot more. And again, remember, it's only his second year, guys. I thought Kayvon Thibodeau actually had a good rookie year. For a rookie, I thought he actually did well last year. And yeah, he got off to a slow start. I had my concerns too, just because the team overall was playing like crap. So I was really hoping to see our last year's number 5 pick overall, kind of lead the way. He took a few games to get there, but Kayvon's been turning it on. He's been looking great. And good for him. So he had 3 sacks. I think he's up to 8.5 sacks so far this season. Kayvon looked great. The young secondary continues to play well. In the second half of the game against the Jets, Garrett Wilson, he was doing a nice job on Deonte Banks, but Deonte Banks overall is having a very good rookie season, especially for a cornerback. He's having a very good rookie season. Cordell Flott has been really good in the slot. Happy to see that as well. Adoree Jackson did not have a good game. He was responsible for that very egregious, pass interference that helped the Jets get to, wind up kicking the game-tying field goal. It was egregious, but I'm glad Adoree's still here. I'm glad Adoree was not traded at the deadline, unless they got say at least a 3rd-round pick from, or something crazy like a 2nd-round pick, which was never going to happen. But barring something like that, like a 3rd-round pick for Adoree, I'm glad he's here, because otherwise this is a very young secondary, and they need a veteran presence who's had success in this league to help, settle them down, to help guide them on the field. And that's Adoree. Adoree's a really good leader, man. He was a great signing for the Giants. This is his 3rd season on the Giants, I believe, so far. His first 2 years with the Giants were excellent, and he lived up to his contract. Final year of his contract right now. I realize he has not had a good year this year, but remember, the first, 4 games, at least, I think he was playing the slot, and he's never played the slot before. So, he's been back to playing the outside opposite of Banks the past few weeks, and he hasn't been as good as maybe as he normally was, the past few seasons for the Giants. But overall, I think he hasn't, he's been fine, except for that play, that within the last minute of the game against the Jets. That was an egregious pass interference call. It was Adoree against like a 3rd or 4th string wide receiver. That was a shame. But here's the thing. When you start getting rid of all of your veterans, it's going to affect, in my opinion, it's going to affect your young players. Yes, your young players, like a Trey Hawkins, for example, can get more playing time, but they may not necessarily be ready for that. And you could start seeing a lot of failure across the board when you get rid of too many veterans who still have game and who are good leaders as well. So I'm glad that Adoree wasn't traded. Like I said, if there was like a 3rd-round pick out there for him, great. Anything less than that, I'd rather have his presence on the field for the rest of the year to help out the young guys, to help them continue to grow, like Banks, Hawkins, Flott. It's important. And I'm scared to think about next year. Like, is their plan to just go completely with the young secondary, or are they going to get like maybe another veteran back here next year who's not a Dory Jackson, who's not going to be nearly as good, but he'll be a lot less money, but not nearly as good as a Dory. That's not going to really do anything anyway. You need a guy out there in the field, a veteran who's out there in the secondary, who's been around, who's a good player, to help settle things down out there for the young guys. I'm afraid that they plan on going like they did with the offensive line, which I got to say, I agreed with their approach on the offensive line entering the season. I was wrong, but I knew there was a lot of risk with that too, in terms of going with only young starters. I knew it was a risk to that. You could be looking at the same thing with the secondary next year if their plan is to only go with the young guys in the secondary next year. That could get really, really ugly, just like you saw with the offensive line. The difference is that I trust Wink and the secondary coach, who's excellent. I forgot his name, but he's an excellent secondary coach. I would trust them more to get their young guys ready than we've seen on the offensive line. So there is a difference there. But I'm like I said, again, I'm glad Adoree is still here. You want his veteran presence out there on the field for the rest of the year. And another decision that people were critical of was Tommy DeVito, not Danny DeVito, the actor, Tommy DeVito, the quarterback, the third string quarterback for the Giants. People were very critical of him not throwing the ball at all. Dable basically only having him throw the ball, I think maybe 1, 2, 3 times, something like that. There was no reason to have him throw the ball in a game like this. Tommy DeVito did not start the game. He was not prepped this week to be the starter for the game. Okay. He was prepped to be the backup. He's never thrown a pass in a real NFL game before. He did in the preseason, but he's never played in a real NFL game before. He was not, prepped to be the starter this week. And he was going up against a very, very tough, one of the toughest pass defenses in the entire NFL with the Jets. The game was a close game. When DeVito came in, I believe the Giants were down 7-3. DeVito did wind up running the ball in for a touchdown to make it a 10-7 game. When you're up by a few points, or if you're only down by a few points, and you have Saquon Barkley and your defense is balling out, why would you risk having a rookie quarterback throw against a very tough pass defense that's got a good, legitimate pass rush as well? Why would you have him do that if you're succeeding these other ways, such as running the ball and relying on your defense? I don't understand the criticism of Dable. People are saying, well, why do you have DeVito on your roster, if you don't trust him to throw the ball? I think if Daniel Jones wasn't coming back this week, which I'm going to get into a little bit, and DeVito was the starter, I think they would have him throw the ball. Maybe not 25 times a game, but they probably have him throw like 18 or 20 games, but they would also be preparing him as a starter. It's a huge difference. He came in the middle of the game with no experience in a live NFL game before against the Jets, a team that has their own problems scoring points with a quarterback who's not very good himself, and the Giants defense balling out. I think it was completely, the sane decision to make. So I think the criticism of, Dable not having DeVito throw the ball is way overboard, and just a ridiculous reaction, because again, the season has been such a mess that they're going to criticize everything. Do you really think that if DeVito were throwing the ball more in this past game against the Jets, that they would have won the game? I don't think so. And that's not even really, in my mind, a criticism of DeVito for all the reasons I just spent 2 minutes talking about. He wasn't, like, again, just to sum it up, the guy never played in an NFL game before, a real regular season NFL game, and he was not prepped to be the starter this week. So, and you're going against a team, the Jets, who are having a hard time scoring themselves. Your Giants defense is balling out the entire game, except for the final minute when they let up like 2, 30-yard passes or something like that to Zach Wilson. That was ridiculous. But Other than that, the Giants defense balled out. It was the right recipe. And the Giants came within 1 second of winning that game. So it was the right thing to do. People need to chill out with the criticism. I'm not saying criticism isn't warranted against Dable, Jones, you name it, Kafka, whoever, the offensive line. This season, everything's been such a mess. But it's like everything is just hyper criticism now. And I think so many people out there just sound like clickbait guys right now, to be honest with you. Okay, let's look to Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is back. I know most fans at this point are probably not excited about that. I am, for a few reasons. Number one, I've loved Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is one of my favorite Giants of all times. I do fully expect, of course, I am not putting all my eggs back in the Daniel Jones basket. I expect Joe Shane, and if I were Joe Shane, I'd be looking to draft a quarterback this upcoming year in 2024 as well. Just from Daniel Jones's performance was so bad. The games that first 4 or 5, 6 games he was in, except for that second half against Arizona, it was so egregiously bad. There is no way I would put all my eggs in that basket, back in that basket, with him as a starting quarterback and no successor drafted. I'd have to be looking to draft his successor. I wouldn't reach to do that, but if we're drafting 1 or 2, that's probably not going to happen. If we're drafting 1 or 2, I would definitely be taking, what's his name from USC or Drake May out of UNC, one or the other. However, that could change if Daniel Jones comes, plays this game and he starts balling out for the rest of the year. If he starts playing like he should have from game 1 or game 2 from the beginning, starts, expanding the field, not just throwing short, intermediate passes, looking deep, taking shots downfield deep. I'm not saying he's got to throw, 60% of his passes have to go 20 yards or more, but he needs to take shots downfield and keep the defense honest and spread the ball around. So they can't crowd the box. They can't crowd the short and intermediate passes. Daniel Jones has got to make plays in every area of the field. That's what he's got to do. When he comes out against the Raiders, that's what he's got to do. I realize Darren Waller is not going to be around for at least a few weeks. I get that. But you know what? You still got Jalen Hyatt, who's a rookie. I get that. You still got Darius Slayton, who had a good year last year, who Jones has a good rapport with. You still have Isaiah Hodgins. But especially with Hyatt and Slayton on the outside, you got to look for those guys going deep sometimes. You got to take some shots downfield. You just have to, just like Tyrod Taylor did. You have to. Saquon's playing. Hats off to Saquon, man, for the 32 carries or touches he had against the Jets. That dude, he carried that team yet again, like he always does, the offense, and hats off to him. But Jones, when he comes back for the rest of the year, if the Giants are if the front office is going to think about, okay, maybe we don't need to take a quarterback after all, it's only going to be if Daniel Jones comes out and doesn't just play like Daniel Jones last year, but he's got to be throwing the ball downfield too. He's got to be taking long shots, deeper shots, 20-yard plus passes downfield. He's got to be making his reads. He's got to be smart with the football. He can't be looking like he's seeing ghosts. None of that. He's got to look like the quarterback they expected when they paid him the big contract. That's what he's got to look like. He's got to look like an NFL starter. He's got to look like a top 12 starter in the NFL. That's what he's going to have to look like. And I think he's got the weapons to do it. The offensive line, I don't want to hear about the offensive line anymore. I know the offensive line has been bad the entire year. I know it's gotten better or looked better the past few weeks because Tyrod Taylor, understood what he had in front of him with his offensive line. So he was getting rid of the ball. He made determined efforts to get, the ball downfield, deep shots at times, and it was effective. And the Giants' offensive line actually looked pretty good this week against the Jets too. So hopefully there is improvement there. But a good quarterback with 4 or 5 years experience like Daniel Jones has now as a starter will make a if he's good, he will make A not so good offensive line at least looks serviceable. He needs to be that quarterback starting this game against the Raiders, continuing through the rest of the year. And quite honestly, I don't care what defense he's up against when they play Dallas again and when they have to play Philadelphia twice. I don't care what defense it's up against. I'm not saying we got to win the game, but you got to look like an NFL quarterback against those defenses. You got to have limited, minimal mistakes. And you got to look like an NFL quarterback, dude. You got to get your passes all over the field, not just short, not just intermediate, deep as well. Make your reads. You got to do it, dude. It's the processing. Here's what stinks just with Daniel Jones is, and I was saying this last week's episode when I had CGF on as a guest, is Daniel Jones has every friggin' attribute I would want as a quarterback and drafting a quarterback. Every single one. Except the processing. And that's the most important of them all. It's the most important of them all. He is an accurate quarterback. He hasn't been this year. Even on the short and intermediate passes, a lot of his passes, they were not leading the wide receiver at all. They're often like right on him or behind him. And the wide receiver would have to adjust and it would prevent, yards after catch. He's looked bad the entire year, except for that second half against Arizona when he looked phenomenal. But again, he is an accurate quarterback. He does have a really nice deep pass when he throws it. He's in his past as a starter for the Giants. He's thrown very nice, deep, accurate passes. His arm is more than strong enough. And his legs are an absolute attribute. They're an absolute positive for him as a quarterback. So he's got the right attitude, to be the quarterback of the New York Giants. Not everybody is going to succeed as the quarterback of a New York franchise, whether it's the Giants or the Jets. You got to be a grounded person, because when the shit hits the fan, they're going to come after you, man. First and foremost, they're going to come at, they, meaning the media, fans. It's just going to be, it's nonstop. You got to be grounded. And Daniel Jones is like the most grounded individual I've probably ever seen in my life. So he's got everything I would want in a quarterback, except for the mental processing. But again, that's the most important aspect. And hopefully he can show that, yes, he does have it. But again, when he comes out against the Raiders, he's got to show it from this game until the end of the season. And I don't care the defense he's up against. I'm not expecting wins against Dallas or Philadelphia, but you got to look like a real quality NFL starting quarterback. And Daniel, I think you got it in you. I really do. It was a bad start to the season. You looked rattled. And honestly, I don't want you to be injured. I didn't want you to be injured. I'm glad you're back. But I think the injury happened at the right time, because I was saying like 3 weeks ago, you need to sit. You need to sit and watch the game. Watch Tyrod play. You need to sit, chill out for like 2 games. And I know Dable never would have done that probably, because they just gave you the big contract. But man, you looked horrible. That was like the worst I've ever seen you for a long stretch of period. That I've seen you play some, a bad game here and there, like a really bad game here and there. But that was a stretch of like 4 or 5 really, really bad games. And they probably weren't going to sit you because, you're the $40 million quarterback, whatever it is. And they just gave you the big contract, and you got to put your big boy pants on. And you have to roll with the punches and develop. But man, I would have sat you for like 2 weeks, because I think he needed to. But I'm glad you're back, Daniel. I'll be rooting for you, buddy. But like I said, if I'm the general manager, unless Jones is coming back and just, really truly balling consistently from the Raiders game until the end of the season, there's no way I could risk putting my job in jeopardy by just, rolling Daniel Jones out next year only as a starting quarterback with no quarterback, no young quarterback that I just drafted waiting in the wings as we groom him, to take over. There's no way. So Daniel, I want you to come back and I want you to succeed, because I don't want to draft another friggin' quarterback. I don't want to draft. I want to draft defense. I want to draft offensive line. I want to get a wide receiver 1. I don't want to draft another friggin' quarterback, man. Anyway, All right, let's move on to the final segment of the show. Leonard Williams. This defense, I think, is going to miss Leonard Williams more than fans realize. And it was, I would have made that deal too. I got to admit, second round pick and a fifth round, second round pick 2024, fifth round pick 2025. That's great. I'm obviously the main thing is the second round pick in next year's draft. That's great value for a guy who was going to be a free agent this upcoming season, unless the Giants extended him, which I guess was not in the plans. But I really hope the Giants do, revisit Leo in the offseason and try to maybe get him back here for like 2 more years, because I think he's got another really good, solid 2 more years in him, Leonard Williams. And he was a perfect fit for this defense. Leonard Williams was very, very underappreciated, in my opinion. People got to realize, yes, I guess his position is described as defensive tackle. Back in the 1980s, he played the same position as Leonard Marshall. And if you ever watch those games from the 1980s and the early 1990s, whenever the beginning of the game, whenever they announce players on the offense and players on the defense, who the starters are, Leonard Marshall would be introduced as Leonard Marshall defensive end. And the Giants back then played a 3-4 defense. He was a defensive end. He was on the far right of the line, as far as I recall. He was on the end of the line, the 3-man front. It's the same thing with Leonard Williams. They call him a defensive tackle because they tend to have more edge rushers, aka outside linebackers, playing more on the line of scrimmage or near the line of scrimmage, going to pressure the quarterback. They do that more. But he really is a defensive end on a 3-man front. Yes, and I realize we have an amoeba defense or whatever you want to call it with Wink Martindale's system, but the reality is, like, that's a base 3-man front. And having Dexter Lawrence, who is a unique nose tackle in what he does, he is a premier player at this point. Dexter Lawrence had something like 15 pressures this game. I think he had a sack too, but 15 pressures, incredible. Leonard Williams is a big part of his success. Dexter Lawrence is going to continue to play at a Pro Bowl level no matter what going forward. Don't get me wrong. But Leonard Williams does a lot of things that, for that type of front, that not many players can do. This is not a 4-3 line. Leonard Williams is a big, strong dude. And he is the type of talent, what was it, like 7 or 8 years ago, whenever he was drafted, Leonard Williams was like a top 10 pick as far as I recall. He might have been a top 5 or 6 pick. And that's the type of talent, like when you're going to try to replace him, you're probably not going to find his talent on the free agent market. And if you want to try to replace him, quality for quality, it's going to take a top 10, top 15 pick in the first round to probably do that, unless you get lucky in the second or third round with a player like that, with that type of quality. But that would be kind of like, a home run in the second or third round. Leonard Williams, the type of player he is, he's usually going to go in the top half of the first round. And I realize he's older. I think he's 30 or he's going to be 30, but that guy, the only time he was ever injured was last year. He missed a few games last year, and he played with a neck injury the entire year last year. And I realized he wasn't as effective, but he certainly wasn't bad. I mean, the Giants defense was pretty good last year. The team did win 9 games, and Leonard Williams was a good part of that success. He's not an easily replaceable piece. And people are saying, okay, well, we traded a player away from an area that we had depth. See, that depth is Ashawn Robinson. What is Ashawn Robinson anymore? I mean, maybe now that he's going to be starting more, maybe we'll see, something fairly impressive. But Ashawn Robinson was always a good player on the Rams and whatever other teams he may have played on. But he was never Leonard Williams. He was never that quality. He was always very good. I'm not knocking him, but he was never Leonard Williams. Nacho's a run stuffer, and he's good. He's not great, but he's a very good, solid run stuffer. He can't pressure the quarterback like Leonard Williams can. So, you're talking about DJ Davidson, a second-year player. I think DJ Davidson's looked pretty good, but I don't have any expectations he's going to be a Leonard Williams type of player. Jordan Riley, who drafted in the 7th round this year. I know, the coaching staff was going crazy about him in camp. He looked really good in the preseason games. I am excited about Jordan Riley, but remember, there have been plenty of times where we've been excited about, say Trey Hawkins, 6th round pick, or plenty of other players who we got in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, and they look great in preseason, they look great in camp, and nothing ever happens of them. So I don't know. I think Jordan Riley, really, I think his ceiling is like he could wind up being like a 2-down player in the future, kind of like as a run stuffer, but he does not have a history, at least in college, of being able to get to the quarterback. He was looking good in preseason, but again, that's preseason. It's preseason. He's not really going against starters. He's going against backups and third stringers, So the point is, I would have felt a lot, I would have felt more fun. Don't get me wrong. I would have made the trade. But it's not like we have a Leonard Williams type of young player ready in the wings to take over that position. People talk about depth. It's not easy replacing a player like Leonard Williams. This is a guy who's excellent against the run and is effective at pressuring the quarterback on a base 3-4 front. Yes, there are plenty of times we'll have Kayvon Thibodeau or Azeez Ojulari or whatever edge rusher playing next to him. There are also plenty of times when he doesn't. So, and again, he's got, unlike many other Giants, Leonard Williams has a great history of staying healthy. So I know Dexter Lawrence is really sad about it because he's been playing with Leo for like 4.5 years, and it stinks, man. It stinks. Just a few years ago, we had a lot of depth with Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, Dalvin Tomlinson, and we had B.J. Hill as the backup. And B.J. Hill is a 3-down quality starter for the Bengals. Now, ever since we traded him a few years ago, stupidly, for their, center, Wilson, I think his name was, another genius Gettleman move. It was a horrible move. But B.J. Hill is, it was just a few years ago, we had this incredible depth on the interior, and everyone was saying, what about edge rushers? What about edge rushers? There weren't really edge rushers available at the time. What they were doing is they were stocking up where they could get talent. And that was defensive, interior defensive linemen who could actually pressure the quarterback from the interior, which is important as well. And at the time, they were stocking safeties as well when they had Jabril Peppers, who, by the way, is having a balls-out season with New England. I always loved Jabril. So anyway, it was the right move, though, anyway, because fact is the season's over. The fact is he is 30 or getting to be 30 fairly soon. Second-round pick. You do need to start getting picks. You can't. That's great value in return. But I will say Seattle, you got a really good player. You're going to be really happy with him. I assume Seattle is going to make their intent is to re-sign him in the offseason. That would be my expectation. So that they weren't just trading a second-round pick only for a playoff push. I assume they're going to try to re-sign him. I hope that we try to re-sign him in the offseason, Leonard Williams. Maybe for not the same amount of money he's making now. But, man, I'm telling you, his presence is going to be missed. And I still expect Dexter Lawrence to play very, very well. But, it's not like this team, had so much depth. This defense has so many young players, and the defense has been playing so well for the past few weeks. Like, everything was falling into place. Bobby Okereke finally got comfortable with the defense, finally understood the defense where he could just react and not have to think. Micah McFadden, second-year linebacker, looking phenomenal alongside of Okereke. Young secondary, looking good, looking very, very good. I'm just afraid you take away a key cog like Leonard Williams, like it's going to be like the game Jenga. You take out that one piece, and I'm not saying everything is going to collapse, but there's a lot of young pieces out there, man. And, the run defense has been better the past few weeks. Okereke, McFadden have been doing a great job against the run, but a lot of that has to do with the studs they've had up front, making life easier for the linebackers too. And it's not just Dexter Lawrence. Leonard Williams was a big part of that. I'm afraid that you're going to see these other players suffer in the quality of their game and their own development as well, which will, it could make them look bad. It could make them look bad. So, but again, I do think it was the right move. I'm just saying I have concerns with Leonard Williams not being there. Again, I think he was extremely undervalued, underappreciated. A lot of it having to do with the nature of Dave Gettleman trading for him. And, basically Dave Gettleman putting himself into a corner with that trade and, having to, he gave Leonard Williams a monstrous contract. But honestly, it's like, when you think about it, when he eventually gave Leonard Williams that monster contract, defensive tackles really have been like getting paid a boatload of money ever since then. It wasn't like Leonard Williams was just like, $10 million or more a year over every single defensive tackle. He may have reset the market for the interior defensive linemen, but after that, interior defensive linemen were getting bigger and bigger and bigger contracts, just like Dexter Lawrence, because pressure in the quarterback's face from the interior of the line, it also blows up the running game too. It also helps blow up the running game. But that type of pressure from the inside of the pocket is worth a lot. It's worth a lot. And if we could re-sign Leo in the offseason, that'd be great. Get a second round pick, for trading him, and then re-sign him maybe for a little less money for 2 more years. I would take that. And heck, then maybe you can draft a legitimate replacement for him, in this upcoming draft or next year. But I'm just saying, players like him, man, you look at even Dexter Lawrence. When he was drafted, the same draft as Daniel Jones, we took Dexter Lawrence, pick number 16 or pick number 17, and people were critical of that pick, because he was an interior defensive lineman. Look at him now. Dexter Lawrence. He is one of the premier interior defensive linemen. And that guy went in the middle of the first round. And this year, unless Daniel Jones comes out of the gate with his ass on fire, looking like a top 12, top 10, top 8 NFL quarterback for the rest of the season, we're probably going to be drafting quarterback. I would have to assume we're probably going to be drafting quarterback in the first round. That means you're probably not going to get a Leonard Williams replacement in this year's draft. It's like the point I'm trying to make. That talent goes in the top half of the first round, just like Leonard Williams did when he was drafted, and just like Dexter Lawrence when he was drafted. That's how it rolls, guys. You can get good interior defensive linemen in the second round. Those are usually 4-3 base defense defensive tackles, like a Dalvin Tomlinson. You can get those guys good 3-down players, but for the interior defensive line, that's usually for a 4-man front, in my opinion. That's how I see it. But Leonard Williams he's a unique player, unique skill set. Not many can do what he does, and I'm gonna miss him. True professional. Loved him on the Giants. That's all I can say about that. But anyway, guys, I guess that's it. I'm going to wrap it up over here. It's a little less than 45 minutes. Cool beans. I covered like 3 different topics, and I kept it to well less than an hour. I am impressed with myself. Anyway, guys, that's it. Week 8, half the season is almost over. We got 17 games in a season now. The 8th game's out of the way. I want to continue to win games. I want to see the defensive side of the ball for the past 4 or 5 weeks has been balling out. They found their footing with Daniel Jones coming back now. I want to see the offense do that too, and I think they can. I think this offensive line can show a lot of improvement. Hopefully they get Andrew Thomas and Neal back soon, and I want to see this young offensive line improve. We've got half the season to go. We still have a lot of games to go. I want to see Jalen Hyatt develop. I want to see Wan'Dale Robinson develop. I want to see Daniel Jones play like a friggin' top 12, top 10 quarterback that I think he can be. It's all up here. Like CGF was saying last week, it's all up here, and it's true. the defensive side of the ball has found its footing. I want the offense to find its footing. We got, 9 games to go. Let's do it. Let's get it done. Let's do it, Giants fans. Daniel Jones, Kayvon Thibodeau, Wandale, Hyatt, Deontay Banks, Dexter Lawrence. Let's get it done, guys. Let's get it done. Anyway, this is Joe. I'm out of here. I'll catch you next week. My beloved fellow Giants fans. I'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. Take care and sit around for this awesome outro video of mine. Love you. Take care.